All right, guys. It's been years since I sat down and done one of these. Yep, here we are again. POCG is back. We got the domain back. We've got the archive being rebuilt, and the podcast is back. I'm Adam Richardson, and this is Playing Out of Control Gaming Episode 1 Who Put the Controller in Your Hand? Today, I've got three things for you: a week of real preservation wins, which is great. There were a lot of them, and so that's top thing for us today. How the Xbox situation's gotten worse even since we just published that editorial just a few days ago. And because it's Father's Day, I want to spend some time talking about the father figures I had in my life and how they helped me in this endeavor with playing out of control gaming and gaming as a whole, and whatever thing that they meant to me. Also, today's topics: GoldenEye's canceled remasters alive again, two football games that never shipped. They were arcade versions for Atomisware, landed on the Dreamcast, and one guy who spent 18 years rebuilding an old game as a free patch. We'll get to all that, but first, if you're new here, and maybe if you don't know me, if you forgot, let me explain to you what POCG is. POCG stands for Playing Out of Control Gaming. We're a classic retro gaming website. We cover everything from Nintendo to PC to DOS. Uh, we cover even newer stuff too. You know, just the old stuff is kind of what we like. Uh, and I cover it kind of the way I played it. And you'll see like some of our old reviewers and stuff. It's just how we played the game, right? So that's kind of how we cover things. It's kind of a little bit crazy sometimes, but this is what it is. Me and my best friend Dave Wright, we started this back in 1998 at the lunch table. I already had a couple websites at that time, and we were talking about doing something different. And so we created something different. We took it beyond what we already had at that time, and within just a couple of years, we had hundreds of articles and contributors writing in from around the country and around the world. Actually, we had gaming companies shipping us hardware all the time and software, and we were just two kids in high school. We didn't know what the crap we were doing, but we made it work. And then so we've brought it back. It's been going more or less off and on for the last 30 years, but we really have brought it back this last year, and really hard. And so the promise back then is the same promise we have now, is that we're not going to lie to you. We're not going to give you filters. We're just going to give you our opinions. We're not going to let sponsors or advertisers dictate what we say. So uh, that's just basically who we are. We got here, like I said, we started. I started the website back on GeoCities. Like, I don't know if most of you probably have no idea what GeoCities is, but it was fan pages back in the day, where you could have like these little neighborhoods and everything like that. And back in the mid '90s, early '90s or late '90s, '96, '97, I had a couple websites on there. One was about Command and Conquer. One was about a bunch of Sega stuff. And the Sega site's the one that really took off. And anyway, we changed it from was Sega Power, Sega Max, Sega Gaming Network, and then we got hosted by another company called Sega, or we called Game Post, and we became Sega Post. As but anyway, so we '98, after me and Dave talked about stuff, we moved, changed it to Playing Out of Control Gaming, and so we discovered everything. And so what happened though with Playing Out of Control Gaming was in the mid 2000s we lost the domain, and that really hurt, and it kind of zapped the energy out of me. But in early 2010, I decided I want to get back into the stuff, and so I started a website called Level 30, and it was mostly hardware and stuff like that, some entertainment, TV shows and stuff, and but wanted to bring gaming stuff back in, and so ended up getting a new domain, pocg.co, and so started back up Playing Out of Control Gaming. And we went off and on, back with Playing Out of Control Gaming, and then late last year, early this year, I was able to get the pocg.net domain back. I had to pay the service to keep an eye out for it, and so we're back on the original domain now. And when I went to to start recovering some of our stuff, I found that, and we had some stuff sitting on a Wayback Machine, and so I started recovering like some of our old reviews and old previews and things like that. And then I ended up going to my mom's house recently, back at the beginning of the year, and I was looking for some old tech stuff and some old games that I had, and um, I ended up finding a couple zip disks and a CD that had a good portion of our news coverage and some of our CGI scripts that had like the text files for the news and stuff that I thought was gone for good. And so I've been restoring that. We've restored about 100 something of those of the reviews and previews, but we still got, I don't know, like 234 reviews to pull out, so a couple dozen editorials, and 30 or 40 previews. And I've got that. The news was easy with the help of some software. I was able to get it converted over. We had like 3,000 news stories over the course of many years there, and they would get those over. They don't require all the extra stuff that a review and stuff like that does, like photos and stuff. And so those are taking a little bit longer. But and so with having that stuff back, we ended up getting redesigning the website with the teal look, which goes back to our 2000 year look, and that's kind of real fun. So it's been a process. I mean, I'll be honest, and this is first time doing a podcast in a decade or more, so it's a little bit different for me. But let me just tell you a little bit about who I am, so you know where I'm coming from. You know, I was a Sega guy. You'll hear some of that later. And this is how the website started, was me being a Sega fan and stuff like that. And and I love Sega, and I love doing this website. And we've been offered money for the website. We've been offered advertising contracts from companies to do stuff, and for the most part, I haven't done anything because like it always feels like the money comes attached with something. They want influence and stuff like that. Uh, and so I haven't done it. I'm not saying we won't ever have advertising. I don't expect to ever have advertising on the website. I'd rather spend my own money running the site. Um, but maybe one day we'll have a Patreon or something like that, or maybe we'll have some sponsors for the podcast that are unrelated to gaming or something like that. Uh, and if we do, I'll tell you exactly where it does, and but we will never let it affect us revenue wise. No, revenue's never going to make a decision on how I review something, or my opinion I give you on the show, or you know anything on the website. I just don't. I don't agree with that. I know some people, they don't have a problem with that, but it is what it is. And you'll notice that most of the time with my reviews, it's just like kind of like stream of unending consciousness. Like, and kind of sounds crazy. And if I really get into a game, that's how it comes out. It's I'll just tell you how I feel about the game, and that's kind of how I am. That's the what they call the maniac voice. That was my original gaming tag from way back when, and got that from some friends at school, and then also from a little game called Midtown Madness. There's an editorial I wrote last week about called Call Signs, and it's about the names we play under. It's about gamer names and stuff like that. So if you're interested in that, look that on the website. And that's it's kind of who I am anyway. But let's get into some news. It was a big week this week in news. So we republished an editorial I did the other day called "The Subsidy," and this is about Xbox. And this is a heavy one, so I want to start with this. It's the most important, really, news article of the week because it's important story right now in gaming overall. We're kind of at a crossroads where we may see, you know, Xbox go away. Right? It's kind of we're there. And I was writing about this. Stories. The news has already changed. Just as I was writing about the stories. So back in April, a studio called Compulsion Games, it's an Xbox studio, won a Peabody Award for their game South of Midnight. And if you know, if a Peabody is not a gaming award, it's a journalism award. It's handed out to great documentaries and things like that. It goes to great reporters, documentarians. It's not something that you see associated with video games. And so that's the level we're talking about, how the quality of the game that this company made was. And you know, the man who runs Xbox Studios called this a major win at a validation of storytelling. And the new CEO of Xbox, who recently took over, praised the studios in the press, about how great this was. And then on June 7th, another Xbox Games studio showed up at the Xbox Games Showcase called Ninja Theory, and they walked out the stage and announced a brand new game called Senua, which is like the third game in that series. And people were like, wall of applause. Those games are critically acclaimed. And but what we didn't know then was watching that is that the reporting now shows that Microsoft had already planned to kill off Ninja Theory. Uh, they had already planned to cancel to cut the studio, and so it's I don't know what's going on with Microsoft. I wrote a lot about this because like it's why did they even let this studio go up on stage and show this presentation if they already planned to cut them? And some people are saying it's probably because they were trying to sell the studio. Uh, maybe not. Sometimes game companies just do stupid crap. I mean, that just happens. Um, but then, on June, I think it was the 15th, yeah, there was a report drops that Ninja Theory and is closing, and then two other studios, Compulsion, which we mentioned about the South of Midnight, and I think it's Double Fine. They were trying to scramble to try to find somebody to help fund them to buy themselves out. Now, this has happened a few times in history where these companies negotiate and buying themselves out, um, but it never works out real great, right? When you're on the chopping block, uh, it's just not great. And then this past Monday, Ninja Theory, the employees found out they were closing, and so I've talked to some people at some of the studios, and everybody's working on their resumes, and some people are trying to figure out what's going on. They've just been kind of told, yeah, we're going to close, but maybe not, maybe we are. What's going to happen to their games? It's just a horrible situation. And I wrote a lot about the details of this into the editorial, but you know what this means kind of for some of us is when you see somebody like Phil Spencer recently left Xbox and they brought in somebody new, and this was a guy that was genuinely a gamer guy, right? And sometimes that's good for a gaming company, sometimes that's bad for a gaming company to be a gamer guy, right? It just doesn't always work out either way. But and at the same time, his heir, Sarah, she left too, and so that tells me that they probably saw something, right? They saw that the Microsoft was putting the pins in on stuff, and that Microsoft wants to spend its money on AI and less of it on video games, and all this traces back to that one word that Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, said uh, just a few weeks ago on the hard part. I think it was one of the podcasts. I can't remember which one it was, but he was talking about how Microsoft is subsidizing entertainment, and he jokes that more money's being made off of Xbox games on YouTube and off of Twitch and stuff like that than by Microsoft. So the content creators are making more money than Microsoft's making off the games. So once a company starts talking about like they're subsidizing something, and uh, it's not a great word. If you start hearing the word subsidize, things are not great. So everything on the cost side, Microsoft's going to be looking at everything, right? They're and Xbox is really expensive. It doesn't make that much money, and they spend a lot of money on development and companies, and so we're in a bad situation right here. So expect a major corporate reshuffle coming up. Expect a lot of different things to be happening soon. And this is kind of important for us. I mean, because not only is Xbox stuff now, retro. OG Xbox is coming up on 25 years, right? And you've got so many of these consoles. The 360 is super popular among younger people now. People want a system that doesn't require to be always online, and that everything's not digital. So that's really important. And to me personally, I always thought Microsoft as the new Sega. They showed up right at the end of the Dreamcast life cycle, and a lot of the talent and energy that was part of the Dreamcast, moved over to the Xbox. From leadership and some of the games and everything like that. And I kind of look at the arc of the Xbox and Microsoft is kind of looking real similar to the Sega arc now too, because the OG Xbox was great, but it didn't take the world by storm, right? It was the first of its kind, but it didn't do that well. It was similar to the Sega Master System, and then the Xbox 360 that changed everything, right? Because the Xbox 360 kind of went head to head with Sony and Nintendo the same way that the Genesis went head to head with this SNES, and in some groups, the Xbox 360 beat Sony. Just like in some places, the Genesis beat the SNES. So then we're kind of getting to like the Xbox One and the Xbox Series X, which have struggled. We're looking more like how the Saturn was and how the Dreamcast was. And so, eh, we saw Sega didn't last past the Dreamcast model. They just couldn't keep competing. And we're right there in that same cycle with Microsoft and the Xbox. And so will Microsoft keep fighting? Will the Xbox go away? They're talking about spinning it off, and it's tough. As a gamer, I like to have choices, and I like to have these systems that competition is good, right? When there's no competition, then the game prices just get astronomically high, uh, and consoles are going to pick back up in popularity again right now because I'm a computer gamer. You can see I've got computers everywhere here. I love computer gaming, but consoles are sometimes easier, and the benefit is consoles, at least till lately, have been cheaper. And with the computing costs and the chip costs going up, still think we're going to see consoles being cheaper overall. So I'm going to keep hoping because like Microsoft's really been dedicated to backwards compatibility with the Xbox, and that let us play some of these older games that we had on the OG Xbox on the 360, and then games on the 360 we could play them on the Xbox One, and over and over you get to keep playing more and more games that games I bought 25 years ago I can still pop into a drive on a Series X and play, and that's an amazing process because like if you look at I've got a PS3 back here, that PS3 version can play PS2 games, but there was only a short amount of time that you could do that with the PlayStation consoles. They went away from that, and now the PS5 can play PS4 games, which is a great thing, but that's kind of going away. And so the big worry I have is with backwards compatibility. Phil Spencer's gone, Sarah Bond's gone, the team behind backwards compatibility's gone, and so that's just a huge thing, right? That the promise we were made uh, about backwards compatibility. If Xbox spins off or shuts down, we may not have that anymore, and we've already kind of seen what happened there when the Xbox 360 store shut down. There were a number of digital only games that you can never buy, never own again, right? It's, if you had them, great, you can still access them, but you can't buy them anymore. So anyway, we'll see what happens there. I don't know, and none of us really kind of know what's going to happen. And every day just in preparing this podcast and writing these articles, it's kind of gotten crazy. So we'll see how it goes. All right, so let's take a look at some of the lighter wins this week because that's some pretty heavy stuff we've already seen. So let's take a look at GoldenEye. GoldenEye 007 for the 360 was an unpublished game. There was a version built Uh, I can't remember how long ago, but it was canceled, right? And so, anyway, it never came out. Well, somebody took that canceled build and recompiled it into a real native PC executable game. So, not an emulator game anymore. It's this game runs for real on its own. It's really a great game. It's like one of the top preservation stories of the week. And this technique here, for preserving these games, called the I can't get the word out, the static recompilation. And it's a big win, and it means a lot for all the other games that have been canceled. Because how many other remastered games are sitting in our vaults somewhere that maybe we can break out and at some point, get them back on, console. I mean, on PC or console or something. Stuff we told we'd never be able to play. I'll have a chance to play at least with the GoldenEye for Xbox 360, the PC version now. So we hope to have a full review of this version up on the site here soon. Something we're going to work on in the next couple of weeks. Also, this past week we saw that there was a never shipped game now on the Dreamcast. That's the one I mentioned in the intro, and this is kind of one of those key things I love to see because I love arcade games. These two arcade football games, Premier 11 and Miracle Stadium, they were built for the Adams Wave, the Thomas Wave board, and that was the Thomas Wave was a Sega Dreamcast based arcade board system, and so someone has now preserved and ported these over to the Dreamcast since it's the same architecture here. So that's great. We're seeing new games on the Dreamcast that we never get to play, and basically, so that's fun, good stuff now. So this is the preservation of gaming. I mean, I hate to see games that are lost and everything. So this is one of those great things. And now they're back on, basically their native homes as it was Dreamcast based stuff. So anyway, super happy about it. Sega guy. Another good Sega story this week was lost Sega Rally DS prototype. A company had made some Sega prototypes for the Nintendo DS for Sega Rally, and they just recently surfaced, after 20 years, and so these games never really got fully made. But now we have the prototypes and we have some demos for them, and I'm sure someone in the community is going to go ahead and look through these and try to build these games out. That's the kind of thing that happens in our community, and it's kind of really great. So I ask you guys kind of what games would you like to see that were canceled to get brought back? Hopefully one day, maybe get dug up soon. Let me know. Drop us a message on social or on the website or on the comments here. Another big news this week was the 18-year Mother remake. So this guy, he got the original Mother game, and it's the Mother is the Japanese game that became Earthbound over here and part of the Earthbound series. And anyway, he's taken the Mother game and completely rebuilt it from the ground up as a patch that runs inside of Earthbound's engine on the Super Nintendo. So made it look better. Everything looks cool. And he's brought it over to be more playable by a lot of people. And so that's kind of cool. Like on Father's Day weekend, see some of these old games you grew up with playing with your father. For me in my case, and some of the games you can see playing behind me. There are some of the games I used to play with my dad and stepdad and everything. And so we'll probably do a review or a longer kind of profile on that game. This Mother one here soon. Now here's a tough one, right? ROM hacking and AI translation. So there's a website called romhack.ing where a lot of fans come together and translate games. And they've recently put in a rule because of there was a bad translation in a game called Langrisser 5 that it was done with AI and it was really rough and people didn't like it. That no more AI is going to be allowed by the games. And I understand that. I don't have a problem with that. But they blocked all the downloads of AI translated patches, and there are games. Some of my family is Slavic, and if
they want to play a game in their native tongue, uh, there's not just a ton of people translating stuff in Ukrainian or Russian, and so sometimes AI can help with that. I think on some of the bigger projects that you definitely don't want AI. You want people to do it. But if it's a game that no one's doing anything with and it's going to a language that most people don't use, I think it would be great to let you know let it happen, right? To let AI do some things, but that's their decision, and and I get it. I'm not against it. They do what's best for them. Um, so anyway, I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on that. What you think about it. Is AI good or bad for that? I work with AI every day in my IT world, so I have mixed feelings on it. A couple quick news articles. Space Cyclones now on the Arcade Archive. So if you like that game, you can go ahead and purchase it out. So it's by the guy that made Space Invaders. So it's a really cool little game, and it's good to see a game like that backed out so you can buy it on modern devices. Wolfenstein 3D, of all things, got just ported to the Atari Lynx. So, you know, you still got an Atari Lynx, or you want to play an Atari Lynx version of Wolfenstein 3D on one of your handhelds, there you go. It's impressive work, and it's great stuff. Sadder note we covered this past week on the news. The RPG Maker forums are closing with no archive plans, so it's a lot of community knowledge gone and lost there with tutorials and everything. Hopefully, that's something that we can get fixed up soon. There's a lot of people working on trying to back it up, and we're going to try to help ourselves. And then on a little bit of broader note, Shinobi Art of Vengeance is now coming to Switch 2 on September 24th. So if you get to love the Shinobi games like I do, and it's got a physical copy, so I'm in. We'll have a preview up soon, and then we got we'll have a review of it once it comes out. There are also a number of games this week that were delisted from the PlayStation 4 store and the Xbox store, so we won't go into all those, but there are some posts on the website about all those. So, but preservation of games, it's important, so that's kind of where we want to cover. A lot of our news is talks about preservation of games, and yeah, I think it's really important.
All right. So the main feature of this podcast today is I want to talk about the fathers of and gaming. Uh, this one's kind of really personal to me. It's like how lucky I was that I had three father figures in my life who kept me straight, and every single one of them, they helped me out. They put a keyboard in my hand or a controller in my hand. They built me into the person that's sitting here talking to you about all this stuff. And my dad, my biological dad, he's the one that got me into gaming because when I was around 3 or 4 years old, he brought home a Nintendo. Some of my best early memories of him are us two playing baseball, like the one behind us. Not that particular baseball game, but a baseball game on the Nintendo and hockey. Uh, and that's before it was licensed games, right? There was just the game was just hockey or baseball. You know, nobody's name like Tommy Lasorda was on the box. These are the games that were just the plain Jane things. There were no teams on the games. It was just the blue team and the red team, and this is before we even had Blades of Steel, which was, my favorite hockey game. The two of us, we didn't have a lot in common other than gaming and sports, I'll be honest. And our relationship throughout my life was rocky. And he left when I was very young. I was, I can't remember, 5 or 6 when he left. But before he left, one of my favorite memories that I had when my parents were still married together was that we went down to a local department store called Brindle's. And there was this brand new game. There was like a couple games that came out that past week, but we got the Brindle's ad, and he said that he wanted to go look at these games. There was some cool looking games he wanted to try, and one of those games was a gold cartridge game, and it was called Zelda. And he looked at it and he says, "We got to buy this. This looks cool, right?" And so we took that home, and I cannot tell you how many times we played, nights playing that game, hours we put into it, trying to figure it out. He knew about as much about games as I knew about games, and that wasn't much at that point. And So we enjoyed that game. A couple years after he left, my mom and my parents got divorced. He moved off, and then he came back. And he got somewhere close to where I lived again, and so I would go see him on weekends. And I didn't have a Nintendo at his house at that time because like the Nintendo stayed at my house, right? He wasn't gonna take the kids Nintendo when he left. But anyway, he had picked up a Sega Master System at a pawn shop, and that was probably one of the most important turns in my gaming life, right? Because like I've mentioned before, and people will tell you, I'm a Sega guy. And the Master System is, the first Sega system, and I know there was another one, the SG, but the Master System really where it all started for me. We had Alex Kidd and Shinobi, and these games I'd never seen on Nintendo or anything like them, on Nintendo, and the colors were different than the Nintendo. And I went down a Sega rabbit hole, and I never really climbed back out. I mean, went on to the Genesis, like the one behind me, and the Saturn and the Dreamcast, and I had a Sega CD, and I got a 32X sitting around here somewhere, and all of that traces back to my dad, and a used pawn shop Master System, and so that's kind of what got me into the Sega thing. My stepdad married my mom a couple years after my dad and my mom got divorced. My stepdad married, and he moved in, and he uh, he had lost his he had a daughter and a wife, and they had died in a car wreck a number of years before that. And so he had lost everything, and because I think of the loss of his daughter, he uh, he would do anything for me. I mean, like he just wanted me to be happy. He wanted me to do whatever. And he was a really, really great father. And he was an electrician, well, not electrician, but he was a robotic engineer, electronics guy, electrical engineer is what he was. He worked for a company that made silicon wafers, and he built the robots and repaired the robots that were in the clean rooms. And he saw that how much I liked, electronics. He will tell you I used to have a VCR, and I programmed a VCR at like 5, and all that stuff. And because of Wayne's background and everything, he wanted to teach me all about that stuff. And I use a lot of that today in IT. I build kiosks out, and I repair, you know, all kinds of stuff, electronic and computer based, and from PNC computers and everything else. And a lot of that comes from what he taught me. And up to that point, I never had a computer. I never even seen a computer. But he had an old Tandy computer, and he had that from Radio Shack. It's called a Radio Shack Color PC, but it was a Tandy. And in the back room of the house, he had basically set it up back there, and he says, "Figure it out, see how it works. I want you to try it out." And anyway, so I had the run of it, and I had to try to figure out how quarter-inch floppy drives worked, and he would show me other stuff, how that stuff would work. And we had this lunar lander game on there that was kind of like ASCII art, if you look at it these days. But that game, uh, that game pissed me off so much. uh, but it was just about learning. It was different, and the graphics weren't even as good as the Nintendo, but it was just something different. And then he had a game called Pitfall, and that was the first time I ever played Pitfall, and I really like Pitfall. And if you can see, I've got a Pitfall, the Mayan Adventure back there, because Pitfall was one of my favorite games on the Sega Genesis after that, the Mayan Adventure one. And so I really, fell in love with those things because of that. And it was my stepdad and Wayne, like I said, he because of that, he's the one that really pushed me down the PC gaming road at some point. Because I never would have became a PC gamer without him, and honestly, I wouldn't be the IT person I am today without him. And I also, I wouldn't be doing this without him, because it was Christmas of 1995 that he bought our family our first real personal computer, a Packard Bell Legend 100 megahertz thing. And he loaded up with games, and he bought a bunch of games since then. After that, too, for me. One of them was Myst, which I have back here too on the shelf. And there's an article editorial I have coming out about that soon. But uh, you know, the bigger thing was he bought me my first piece of software called WebExpress. It was an HTML WYSIWYG editor, WebExpress by Microvision, and that's the tool that I used to make my second websites and my Command and Conquer website, and then ultimately the tool me and Dave used to create Playing Out of Control Gaming back in the olden days, 1998. So POCG exists because of my stepdad handing me a design software and a computer and said, run with it. And so this whole thing, everything about that I'm doing today, everything I've wrote about for the last 20 something years, it really stems back to that. And lastly, I'll tell you about my grandfather. We called him Papa. And he is basically, he was that father figure that was always there in my life. Like when my dad left or things were going on bad with my dad, he was there. When we were, even when my stepdad was there, my grandfather was there. He took me to school, because my parents had to work, weird hours. My mom was a nurse, and my stepdad was a mechanical engineer and electrical engineer, and he was always in the plant in early hours. And so I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. And my papa, he was a Baptist preacher, hellfire brimstone. And people would say a man like that, he's not going to like technology and video games and stuff like that. But that wasn't the grandfather I knew, the papa I knew. I mean, now my mom would tell you that he didn't let her have records back in the day, but for me, he was like my stepdad in a way. He said he would do anything for me, and so my mom would drop me off there early in the morning, at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and my grandfather would get me ready and feed me breakfast and take me to school, and then he would pick me up from school, and we would ride around on the tractor farming, plowing at his house, and we would show me he had a Model A Ford that he was restoring. He showed me that, and then he had like a Chevy 34, I think it was, that he was restoring as well. And we would look at that, and he would just show me all this stuff because he was a diesel mechanic in the Marines, and he had all this stuff like that he did when he wasn't preaching. And he had a diesel shop at one time, and I remember next to my grandfather's house, there was some people that lived there, and they built a swimming pool. And they had a kid about my age, and they would not let me swim in that pool, and they were really mean and stuff towards me. And my grandfather's like, that's not going to happen. He's like, so he went out, called somebody, and had a pool put in. So a hellfire brimstone preacher also got a pool, which is something that you don't see a lot in the South at that point in time. But so we had our own pool, and he'd love to tell people. He said, I built that pool for Adam so he'd have somewhere to have fun at my house. And his encouragement and everything in me went beyond that, because in high school, I went to a private high school for a number of years, and he would pick me up and take me home, and that's where me and Dave met. And um, I was telling him, it's like, about the website stuff, and I probably didn't understand what the internet was. I mean, honestly, he came from, a generation before the internet, and so trying to explain to him about the internet and stuff like that was kind of hard. But I was telling him about the website, Playing at Control Gaming, and all these people. He's like, all these people wanted to see it and everything, and he didn't understand that. And I mentioned to him I was receiving in these PlayStation 1 games. And I said, I don't have a PlayStation 1, and I don't have a way to play some of these games. And he's like, well, where can we get one? I was like, I guess at the department store. And so we went and bought a PlayStation 1. I think it might have actually been at an EB Games in the mall where we got it, because I think Kmart didn't have it or something like that. But he was supportive of me of anything I did. And he just wanted to be part of my life. And so a hellfire brimstone Baptist preacher bought me a PlayStation. Just things people don't really understand or think would happen, but that's what happens. And that's special. That and all three of my
my father figures, my dad, my stepdad, and my grandfather, they've all passed away now. And my stepdad, it's been about 9 years, and my grandfather about 6 years, and my dad died last year. But they're not forgotten to me, and the memories that they shared with me, they're not forgotten either. I am who I am because of them, and one of them gave me a Nintendo, one of them gave me Sega. My stepdad gave me computers, and my grandfather gave me the gift to continue on and have fun in life, and a PlayStation. None of them had to spend time with me. None of them had to put their hands, or hand things to me. Basically to raise me up like they did. But every single one of them did anyway. And, so when I said all that, I told you that story. And there's a full write on the website. It's a little bit more detailed and some photos and stuff like that if you're interested. But spend some time with your dad if you're still got your dad around, and if you're a father now, spend some time with your kids. Play some games with them. Be invested in their life because they'll remember it. I remember it. I'm 43 now, and I would give anything for just one more round of a game with, my dad or my stepdad, or asking a question to, my grandfather, or spend some time with them working on my car. So anyway, that brings us to the end of the episode, and I just want to leave a couple things. Who put the question of the week? Who gave you the control, right? Who was the influential person in your life that made you who you are? Who made you a gamer? Tell me about them. Drop them in the comments. Send it to me. I want to read about it. Look us up on social media. And let us know what you think about the show. I'm going to try to do this at least once a week. I know I stumbled around today and stuff like that. I'm just getting back into it, but the hardest part is just getting going, right? And check us out on POCG.net. We've got reviews and stuff being restored all the way back to 1996, and most of the stuff that's been restored. We still, like I said, have a couple hundred reviews to go, but most of the news has been restored. If you want to see what the news was in 1998 for video gaming, go check our archive. Probably about the same as it is today. People getting fired and games being canceled. But so anyway, check us out. We got an RSS feed if you like that. Hit us up on socials. And just a quick reminder for maybe next week's episode. The Nintendo 64 is turning 30 on June 23rd, I think it is, in Japan, from when the release was. So share with me your Nintendo 64 memories. We'll be talking some about that, and we look forward to the GoldenEye review and some of the other write-ups we got about, like, Mother being remade in Earthbound, which is showing on the screen behind me. So anyway, hope you all have a good weekend. Happy Father's Day. My name is Adam Richardson, and this has been Playing Out of Control, episode 1.